The great ships of the Zareth Empire moved through the stars like silver shadows. Their empire had ruled for centuries, binding dozens of worlds under their banners. Now, for the first time, Earth had been invited to their grand court. Many said it was an honor, but Captain Elias Grant did not feel honored when he stood in the vast chamber of crystal and light. He felt like a man who had stepped into another world, one that judged him with every passing second. The Zareth throne room was not built for humans. The pillars stretched so high that Elias had to tilt his head back until his neck ached. Beams of soft green light moved across the walls, alive with alien patterns. Dozens of nobles stood in robes that shimmered like flowing metal, their eyes sharp, their expressions unreadable. Their gazes fixed on him as if they were studying a creature too strange to understand. Elias stood tall in his dark earth uniform, refusing to bend, even as the silence pressed against him like a weight. At the center of it all sat Queen Arivora, ruler of the Zareth. Her presence filled the room more than the towering walls or the glowing floor. She was tall and regal, her skin a deep shade of silver blue, her crown a circle of living crystals that pulsed faintly with her heartbeat. When she spoke, her voice echoed as if the chamber itself bowed to her. And beside her stood Princess Kaelira, her daughter, who seemed younger than most of the nobles, but her eyes carried the same sharpness as her mother's. There was a grace in her every movement, a calm power in the way she held herself. The ceremony had been planned as a formal welcome. Earth's first ambassador was supposed to step forward, bow, and accept whatever words the queen gave him. But everything changed when the princess spoke. In front of all the nobles, she lifted her hand and pointed at Elias. Her voice was soft but clear as she declared her choice. She had chosen him. The room froze. Murmurs spread like fire through the court. Some gasped. Others leaned closer to whisper, and a few narrowed their eyes in open anger. It was clear that this was no ordinary event. Elias stood there trying to make sense of the words. He had expected many things, greetings, demands, perhaps even threats. But he had never expected a princess of an alien empire to choose him before her people. Elias's heart beat hard against his chest, but he kept his face calm. He had learned long ago that fear showed too easily, and in a place like this, weakness would be taken as an insult. His eyes met the princess's for only a moment. Her expression was unreadable, but her choice had been deliberate. Whatever her reason, she had thrown him into the center of something far greater than simple diplomacy. Queen Arivora rose from her throne, her robe flowing like liquid silver. Her gaze cut through the murmurs of the court, silencing them. When she turned her attention to Elias, the weight of it almost crushed him. "A daughter of my house does not choose lightly," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "You stand in a place no human has stood. Do you accept what she offers?" The words rang through the chamber, and Elias knew every noble waited for his answer. He was supposed to fall to his knees, to thank the queen, to accept without hesitation. It would have been the safe path, but Elias felt a knot in his chest. He did not know this princess. He did not know her heart, her will, or her reasons. To accept without thought would be a lie, and if there was one thing he would not do, it was give away his freedom so quickly. For a long moment, he said nothing. The silence grew heavier, as if the chamber itself demanded obedience. Then finally he drew in a breath. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, his voice steady but firm, "I honor your people and I respect your daughter, but I cannot accept something I do not understand." The words fell like stones into water, sending ripples through the hall. Nobles shifted uncomfortably. Some hissed in disbelief. Others whispered sharply to each other. Elias felt the air grow colder, as if the room itself was preparing to swallow him whole. But he did not look away from the queen. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and though her face remained calm, he felt her measuring him. She was not a ruler used to hearing the word no, yet Elias had spoken it in front of her court without trembling. For the first time since he had entered the chamber, he thought he saw something flicker across her face, not anger, but curiosity. Beside her, Princess Kaelira tilted her head. Her gaze locked on Elias. There was no sign of insult in her expression. If anything, she looked intrigued, as though his refusal had stirred something in her thoughts. The hall was silent again, the future balanced on a single breath. Elias stood alone, surrounded by 100 alien eyes, but he did not lower his head. He did not apologize. Whatever storm his answer had unleashed, he was ready to face it. For he was human, and humans did not bow to choices forced upon them. The silence in the throne room stretched until it became almost unbearable. Every noble stood still, their glowing robes catching the light as if even their garments held their breath. Elias remained in place, his back straight, his hands calm at his sides. He had spoken his truth, and now he waited for the storm that might follow. The queen rose slowly, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that could break lesser men. Her long silver-blue fingers touched the arm of her throne, and the living crystals of her crown glowed brighter. When she spoke, her voice rolled like thunder. "You refuse my daughter before the eyes of my court. Do you understand what such words mean, human?" Elias did not flinch. His voice was steady, though every instinct inside him urged him to tread carefully. "I understand," he said, "that it sounds like an insult. But that is not my intent. On earth, we do not bind ourselves to another person with so little understanding. If I were to accept without thought, it would not be honest, not to her and not to myself." Gasps rippled through the nobles. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others whispered to one another in sharp tones. For them, refusal was worse than arrogance. It was rebellion against tradition. Yet Elias stood firm, his eyes never leaving the queen. The queen's expression did not shift. She was like a statue carved from living stone. Only her crown pulsed brighter and brighter, as if her very thoughts were alive. At last she leaned forward slightly. "You speak of honesty, human. Honesty is a rare trait in courts such as mine, but do not mistake rarity for strength. My daughter's choice is not a game." Beside her, Princess Kalyra finally stepped forward. Her robe shimmered softly in the green light, and her voice was gentler than her mother's but carried an edge of curiosity. "Mother, allow me to speak." The queen inclined her head, and Kalyra's gaze turned toward Elias. Her eyes were a shade between silver and violet, and they seemed to see through him. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why do you not wish what so many across the stars would beg for?" Elias met her eyes. "Because on Earth a bond like this is not a prize," he said. "It is a choice, a shared choice. If I were to say yes simply because it is offered, then I would be lying to both of us. You deserve someone who chooses you freely, not because he fears a throne." Her head tilted slightly, her lips parting as if she had never heard such words. The court murmured louder now, scandal and disbelief mixing in their voices. Yet Kalyra did not seem angered. Instead, she looked thoughtful, almost fascinated. The queen rose fully to her height, her presence towering over everyone in the chamber. "Your words challenge centuries of tradition," she said. "Here, choice is not a luxury. Here, duty binds stronger than desire. You say you will not accept without your own will. Then you have set yourself against the ways of my people." Elias drew in a quiet breath and answered carefully. "Perhaps, but I do not mean to disrespect your people. I only mean to live as a human. We believe true strength is not in following blindly, but in choosing with open eyes. That is what makes us who we are." A hush fell over the court. The nobles had no ready answer to such words, for they were unlike anything they had been taught. Some frowned deeply, others studied him as though weighing whether this strange human's defiance was foolishness or wisdom. The queen regarded him for a long, silent moment. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes glowed faintly with something beyond anger, something closer to wonder, though hidden beneath her mask of power. "You are either very brave," she said slowly, "or very foolish." Elias gave a faint, respectful nod. "On Earth, sometimes it is the same thing." That remark caused a ripple of laughter among a few of the younger nobles, though quickly hushed under the weight of the queen's stare. Kalyra's lips curved into the smallest of smiles before she straightened, returning to her regal composure. The queen lifted her hand, and the chamber lights dimmed slightly. "Enough for now. The human will remain in my halls. He will answer more questions before I pass judgment on his refusal. Until then, he is not to leave. He will be watched." Guards in gleaming armor stepped forward, their weapons glowing faintly at their sides. Elias knew he was not under arrest, but he also knew he was not free. The queen had not punished him outright, but she had placed him in a cage of courtesy. As he was escorted away, Elias glanced back at the throne. The queen sat tall, her gaze still locked on him, as if she sought to unravel every layer of his mind. But it was the princess who held his eyes last. Her expression was not anger or pride, but curiosity, deep, unshaken curiosity. She had grown up in a world where choice was a word spoken rarely, and now a human had dared to make it the heart of his defiance. Elias walked through the great halls of the Zareth Palace, surrounded by alien guards, but his steps were steady. He knew the days ahead would be difficult. He had spoken a truth that challenged an empire, and empires did not bend easily, yet he also knew that something had shifted in that throne room. The queen had not silenced him. The princess had listened, and that meant his words had power. For the first time since he had left Earth, Elias felt the weight of what it meant to be human in a galaxy filled with ancient powers. He was not the strongest, nor the tallest, nor the most feared, but he carried something that could not be taken by force, the right to choose. The chambers given to Elias were larger than any room he had known on Earth. The walls were carved from living crystal that pulsed with faint light, as if the palace itself breathed. Tall windows opened to the endless night of space, where stars burned brighter than diamonds. Guards stood at the door, silent and unmoving, their armor glimmering like molten steel. Though Elias was treated as a guest, he knew he was being watched every second. He sat at a long table set with food he could barely name. Strange fruits glowed softly and drinks shimmered in silver cups. He took only small tastes, careful not to show weakness or greed. He was lost in thought when the sound of footsteps pulled his attention to the doorway. Princess Kalira entered, her steps light, her robes flowing like liquid light. The guards bowed their heads as she passed, but she waved them back, signaling she wanted privacy. Elias rose to his feet, unsure of what to say. He was still a guest under suspicion, and she was royalty. Yet her eyes held none of the cold judgment he had seen in the court. Instead, they carried something else. Curiosity, sharp and unrelenting. "You refused me," Kalira said softly, as if still trying to understand the act. "Do you realize what that means in our world?" "I realize," Elias answered. His voice was calm, though he knew the wrong words could cost him everything. "To you it must seem like disrespect, but it was not. I meant only to be honest." Her gaze narrowed slightly, but not with anger. "Honest," she repeated, almost tasting the word. "On Zareth, honesty is shaped to fit duty. We are born to serve the Empire. Desire and choice are luxuries that exist only in stories. When I chose you, I expected your silence, your obedience. Yet you spoke against it, against me and against my mother's court." Elias met her eyes steadily. "On Earth, silence is not respect. It is surrender. If I had bowed without thought, I would have given you nothing real. What I said was not against you. It was for myself and for what I believe." Kalira walked further into the room, her hands brushing the smooth surface of the crystal wall. For a long moment she said nothing, her face thoughtful. Then she turned back to him. "Your people are strange. Do you not understand what it would mean to join our house? Power, safety, immortality of name, your world would be honored for ages." "Perhaps," Elias admitted. "But if I accepted only for power, I would be dishonoring both of us. You don't want a bond that begins with a lie, and I don't want to give one." The princess tilted her head, studying him as if he were a puzzle she had never encountered before. No noble had ever dared to refuse her. None had ever spoken to her as though she were simply a person, not a prize. The idea unsettled her, yet it also stirred something inside her she had never felt. Curiosity about her own will. "On Earth?" she asked slowly. "You speak of choice. But what does that mean? If your people are asked to join hands, how do they decide?" Elias paused, searching for the simplest words. "We decide by knowing each other, by speaking, by sharing, by seeing if our hearts move in the same direction. It cannot be forced. Sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes slowly, but it must always be real. Without choice, it is only a cage, no matter how golden." Kalira listened in silence, her violet silver eyes fixed on him. His words painted a world she had never seen. She had grown up inside walls of duty, where every step of her life was guided by custom. Now this human spoke of freedom as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. For the first time, she wondered what it would be like to choose not because her mother commanded it, not because tradition demanded it, but because her own heart willed it. The thought was dangerous, yet strangely exciting. "You risk much by speaking this way," she said at last. "If the court decides you insulted me, you could be punished, perhaps even executed." "I know," Elias replied. "But what is the worth of life if I live it dishonestly? I would rather risk truth than live forever in silence." Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. She had expected defiance to come with arrogance, yet Elias's words carried no pride, only conviction. She found herself wanting to ask more, to hear more of this strange human belief. The door shifted slightly as one of the guards stepped forward, perhaps uneasy at the long silence. Kalira raised her hand and the guard froze before retreating again. She stepped closer to Elias, her eyes never leaving his. "You're not like the others I have met," she said softly. "Most kneel. You stand." "Because I am human," Elias said, his voice steady, "and humans bend only when they choose to." Her gaze lingered on him, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them. It was not love, not yet, nor loyalty. It was something simpler but stronger, the first spark of understanding. When she left the room, her steps were slower, her thoughts heavier. Elias remained behind, staring out the great windows at the endless stars. He knew the court would not forgive easily. He knew danger pressed closer with every word he spoke. But he also knew this: the princess was listening. And sometimes, even in the heart of an empire, one listener was enough to begin change. The news of Elias's refusal spread through the Zareth court like fire through dry fields. Nobles whispered in the crystal halls, their voices sharp and bitter. Some called the human arrogant, others called him reckless, and a few suggested he was clever in ways they had not expected. Everywhere he walked, Elias could feel eyes on him, measuring, judging, waiting for him to make a mistake. The palace itself seemed alive with rumors. Servants avoided meeting his gaze, though they bowed politely. Guards followed his steps with quiet intensity. Even the shimmering walls, alive with faint pulses of light, seemed to echo the tension building around him. He had spoken words that no alien dared to say before their queen, and though he had not been punished, the uncertainty made the court restless. One evening, Elias was escorted into a great dining hall where nobles gathered around long tables. Food glittered in strange colors, drinks glowed faintly, and music from alien instruments filled the air. He took his place at the far end of the room, aware that many nobles sat apart from him, whispering behind jeweled hands. A tall noble with golden eyes rose and spoke loudly enough for all to hear. "This human believes himself wiser than the Zareth," he said, his voice heavy with disdain. "He dares to turn away the princess as if our customs are unworthy of him. Tell me, human, do you think Earth is greater than the Empire?" The room quieted, every gaze shifting to Elias. He knew a trap when he heard one. If he said yes, he would insult them. If he said no, he would betray himself. So he answered with the same calm strength he had shown before. "I do not think Earth is greater. I think it is different. And difference is not weakness. It is another kind of strength." Some nobles scoffed. Others muttered. But a few tilted their heads, their expressions thoughtful. The golden-eyed noble narrowed his gaze but sat down again, unsatisfied. Elias had not given him the anger he wanted. Later that night, Princess Kalira entered the hall. The music softened as she walked, her presence commanding silence without a word. She took her place beside her mother, but her eyes flickered toward Elias for only a moment before she turned back to the gathering. The nobles rose to their feet, bowing low. The queen did not speak. Instead, she let her court voice their thoughts. One noble after another rose, each declaring their opinion. Some demanded the human be punished for his insolence. Others warned that punishing him might show weakness if Earth protested. A few, though fewer in number, suggested that perhaps there was wisdom in hearing his perspective. Kalira listened quietly, her face unreadable. But inside she felt something stirring. She had spoken with Elias in private, and his words still echoed in her mind. He had not insulted her as the nobles believed. He had spoken of something she had never known, freedom, the right to choose. The thought would not leave her. At last the queen raised her hand. Silence fell immediately. Her eyes swept the chamber before resting on Elias. "You divide my court, human. Some call you a fool. Some call you bold. Tell me, are you here to change us or only to stand by your own beliefs?" Elias stood slowly, his voice carrying steady through the hall. "I am not here to change you. I am here because you invited my people, but I cannot be anything other than what I am. If that challenges your ways, then it is only because truth often challenges power." The hall erupted in whispers. Again, but Elias remained calm, his gaze never leaving the queen. Arivora studied him for a long moment, her crown glowing faintly with her thoughts. Then she gestured and the gathering ended. Nobles filed out, many throwing sharp glances at Elias as they passed. When the hall emptied, Kalira lingered. She approached her mother, speaking softly but firmly. "He does not speak like the others," she said. "He does not kneel, yet he does not mock. His words, they carry weight." The queen regarded her daughter in silence before answering. "Be careful, child. Curiosity can become a chain stronger than duty. Do not let his defiance cloud your judgment." But Kalira's mind was already clouded, not by defiance but by questions she had never dared to ask before. Later that night, Kalira sought Elias again. She found him in the quiet gardens of the palace, where crystal trees glowed with soft light and fountains sang with alien music. He stood alone looking up at the stars, his face calm but thoughtful. "You are surrounded by enemies," she told him softly. "Do you not fear what they plan?" Elias turned to her, his expression steady. "Fear does nothing but blind me. I will face whatever comes, with the truth as my shield." She studied him in silence, the glow of the crystal trees reflecting in her eyes. For the first time in her life, she wondered what it meant not to live for duty, but for choice, and though she did not say it aloud, a part of her wished to learn more. The night deepened, but the seeds of change had already been planted. The court was tense, the queen was watching, and the princess was questioning. Elias had come as an envoy, but now he was something more, a spark in a world that had never known fire. The morning came with a summons. Elias was escorted from his chambers by silent guards in shining armor, their faces hidden behind glass-like masks. They led him through long halls of crystal and metal, past towering doors that opened without sound. At last he entered a vast chamber he had not seen before. The floor was marked with glowing lines, and walls stretched upward like the inside of a great dome. Dozens of nobles filled the high balconies, their voices hushed with anticipation. At the center stood Queen Arivora and Princess Kalira. The queen's eyes were sharp, her presence heavy with authority. Her crown glowed brighter than usual, as though she had summoned the very will of the palace itself. "You have spoken against tradition," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "You claim honesty and choice give you strength. But words are wind. Here strength is proven. You will face the trial of worth. Pass and you may yet remain in this court. Fail and you will leave in shame or worse." The nobles murmured approval. Many had waited for this, eager to see the human humbled. Elias bowed his head slightly in respect but said nothing more. He knew this was not a choice. It was a test he had to endure. The first trial began without warning. From the floor, shapes rose, great pillars covered in glowing symbols. A voice filled the chamber, echoing from unseen walls. "Solve the pattern. Order creates survival, chaos brings ruin." The pillars shifted, symbols glowing in changing sequences. Elias stepped closer, studying them carefully. The symbols looked alien, but patterns lived in everything. Math, nature, the stars themselves. Slowly he traced the shapes, watching as they repeated in cycles. The answer was not brute force, but recognition. He pressed the symbols in the correct order, and the pillars sank back into the floor. A wave of whispers passed through the nobles. Some were surprised, others displeased. A human had solved what many young nobles struggled with in their own trials. The second challenge rose from the ground. This time, a holographic battlefield spread before him. Armies of alien figures moved across glowing terrain, and he was given command of a small group. The voice spoke again. "Command with wisdom. Protect your forces. Defeat the greater enemy." Elias studied the battlefield. His forces were fewer, weaker, and outnumbered. Many nobles smiled, certain the human would fail. But Elias remembered his years as a soldier on Earth. He had faced impossible odds before. He moved the pieces not with strength but with strategy. He set traps, used the terrain, and sacrificed where he must to protect the core of his force. The battle simulation ended with his small army still standing while the larger force had been scattered. Gasps echoed in the balconies. Even the queen leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable. The third trial came in silence. A single figure appeared in the chamber, a projection of a child frightened and crying. Beside it stood a shimmering weapon. The voice whispered, "Save the many by ending one, or save the one and risk the many." Elias froze. It was not a puzzle of symbols or a game of strategy. It was a moral dilemma. He had seen this before in war when choices had no clean answers. He stepped forward, kneeling before the crying child. His hand hovered near the weapon but did not touch it. "I will not harm the innocent," he said firmly, his voice echoing. If I must find another way, I will. To protect the many by destroying the helpless is no true victory. There is always another path. The chamber fell silent. The image of the child faded and the weapon vanished. For the first time, the queen's mask of calm shifted. Her eyes glowed brighter, and her lips tightened as if hiding something deeper. The nobles broke into sharp whispers. Some called him weak, others called him foolish, but a few, just a few, nodded in respect. They understood. The queen rose from her seat, her voice filling the hall once more. You have passed the trials, human. You did not win by strength, but by mind, by heart, and by will. Yet still you refused the bond my daughter offered. Tell me, what are we to make of you? Elias met her gaze, standing tall though the weight of her words pressed heavily on him. I am only myself, a human. I cannot pretend to be what I am not, nor give what is not truly mine to give. If that makes me unworthy, then so be it. But if worth is measured by truth, then I have shown all I can. For a long time the queen said nothing. The chamber waited, tense and silent. Then she raised her hand and the light in her crown dimmed. Enough, she said. The trial is ended. The court will decide what comes next. The nobles bowed, though many still whispered in discontent. Elias felt the weight of their stares but did not look away. He had passed the test, but he knew this was not the end. It was only another step in a path that grew more dangerous with every choice. Kalira's eyes followed him as the guards led him out. For the first time, her heart beat not with duty but with wonder. The human had faced trials that would have broken many, and he had done so not with power but with the courage to be himself. She could not forget his words. There is always another path, and she began to wonder if, perhaps her own path might be different than the one tradition demanded. That night, the palace was quieter than usual. The trials had shaken the court, and whispers still flowed through the endless halls of crystal. Some nobles believed the human had insulted their traditions. Others spoke in low tones about his cleverness, though they dared not praise him openly. The stars outside the dome shone brighter, as if the universe itself was watching. Elias sat alone in his chambers, his thoughts heavy. He had passed the tests, but he knew victory was not final. The queen had not spoken her true judgment. He could feel it in the way her eyes had lingered on him, sharp and unreadable. She was a ruler, and rulers never gave away their intentions too quickly. The silence broke when the door opened without warning. 2 guards stepped inside, their armor reflecting the light of the chamber. One of them spoke in a firm voice. The queen summons you, come. Elias rose to his feet, steadying himself with a breath. He knew this moment would come. The guards led him down winding corridors, through tall doors and into a smaller chamber, lit only by a soft glow. There was no throne, no nobles watching, only a table of silver crystal and 2 seats facing one another. Queen Arivora sat waiting. Her crown rested lightly on her head, her long cloak folding across the floor like flowing water. She gestured for Elias to sit. Come, human. Tonight we speak without trials, without audience, just truth. Elias sat across from her, meeting her eyes with calm respect. I am ready. For a long moment, the queen studied him as though weighing his soul. Then she leaned forward slightly. You refused my daughter. Her voice was soft, but carried great power. No one refuses her. She is heir to my throne, chosen by tradition, blessed by blood. And yet you stood before her and denied her bond. Why? Elias breathed slowly. He had expected this question, but now that it had come, it felt heavier than he imagined. Because I do not believe in a bond without choice. Your daughter is strong, noble, and kind, but I cannot give myself because others command it. If I accept, it must be because my heart decides, not because I am told. The queen's eyes narrowed, but not in anger, more in curiosity. You speak of hearts and choices. In our empire, duty is greater than the heart. Bonds are made for strength, for unity, not for personal desire. Do you think your small human way is better than centuries of our rule? Elias did not flinch. I do not say better. I say different. On Earth, we have made mistakes. We have fought wars and broken promises. But we also learned something. When people choose freely, they fight harder to protect what they love. A bond of duty may be strong, but a bond of choice can be unbreakable. For the first time, the queen's expression softened. She sat Kay in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly against the table. You are bold, Elias. Bold enough to challenge me in my own hall. Bold enough to speak of love as though it outweighs duty. She tilted her head, her golden eyes glowing faintly. "And yet you survived the trials. You think differently, but your will is sharp. That I cannot ignore." Silence lingered between them, heavy yet thoughtful. Elias remained still, letting her words sink into the air. Finally, the queen asked another question, her voice lower, almost personal. "Tell me truthfully, do you find Kalyra unworthy? Do you see her as lesser than yourself?" Elias shook his head immediately. "No, she is worthy far beyond me. She carries a strength I have rarely seen, and a spirit that shines even when others cannot see it. But worthiness is not the question. The question is whether I can truly offer what she deserves, and I will not lie to her or to you." The queen's eyes studied him again, longer this time, searching for weakness. But Elias's voice had not wavered, and his eyes did not fall. She saw no deception, only a man speaking what he believed. At last, she sighed, a sound rare for a ruler. "You confuse me, human. My court expected arrogance or cowardice. They expected you to fail or to kneel and accept what was given. But you do neither. You resist, yet you do not insult. You deny, yet you do not diminish. You are the first who has left me with no simple answer." Elias gave a faint smile. Perhaps that is because the answer is not simple. The queen's gaze flickered, almost amused, though her face remained regal. Then her tone sharpened again. "Understand this, Elias, you walk a dangerous path. Some in this court would rather see you gone. They will plot in shadows, whisper in halls, move against you. I will not always protect you." "Do you accept that risk?" Elias straightened. "I do. I did not come here for safety. I came to learn, to see, to understand. If danger follows, I will face it." The queen rose, her cloak shifting like flowing fire. She stood tall above him, her crown glowing faintly in the dim chamber. "Very well. You have spoken truth, and you have earned a place still in this palace. But know this, human, the future is shifting. You may have planted questions in my daughter's heart, and questions can be more dangerous than enemies." With that, she turned and moved toward the doorway. Before leaving, she paused and glanced back at him one last time. "You may yet prove more than a curiosity. Do not waste the chance you have been given." Then she was gone, leaving Elias alone in the quiet chamber, his thoughts burning with the weight of her words. He had spoken with honesty, but honesty was not always safe. He knew the queen had not decided fully what to do with him. But one truth was certain. The path ahead would test him more than the trials ever had. And somewhere in the palace, Princess Kalyra was thinking of the man who dared to refuse her, not with scorn, but with a strange fire in her heart that she could not ignore. The palace woke early the next morning, but whispers had already spread faster than the rising sun. Everyone spoke of the queen's private meeting with the human. No one knew the details, but every noble guessed, and their guesses twisted into rumors. Some said Elias had been humbled, others swore the queen was impressed by him. Either way, one thing was certain. The court had never seen a man like him, and the uncertainty he carried unsettled them. Elias, however, walked the halls with steady steps. He did not pretend the danger was gone. He could feel eyes on him wherever he went, sharp gazes that measured him like a threat. Still, he refused to let their whispers bend his back. He was human, and humans endured storms without breaking. Princess Kalyra found him in the gardens, where the air shimmered with glowing vines and flowers that sang faint notes when the breeze touched them. She approached quietly, though her presence was never truly quiet. It carried weight, the kind that pulled eyes and hearts toward her. Elias turned when he sensed her near, and for a moment silence hung between them. "You spoke with my mother," Kalyra said softly, her silver blue eyes fixed on him. "Yes," Elias answered. "She wanted truth. And you gave it?" "As much as I could," he said with a faint smile, "though I don't think she liked every part of it." Kalyra's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. She does not often hear words that challenge her. "But you do not fear her. That is new to her, to me as well." Elias studied her, sensing something unspoken in her voice. She was no longer the distant princess who had first chosen him in the great hall. There was curiosity in her gaze, but also a quiet conflict. "You wonder why I chose you?" she said suddenly, as though she had read his thoughts. "I see the question in your eyes. Perhaps you think it was whim or a test or an insult, but it was not. When you entered the throne room, I felt something different. The others, the nobles, they bend. They smile and bow and hide their hunger. But you stood like a stone even under my mother's gaze. That is why I chose you." Elias listened, but he did not rush to answer. He had learned that silence sometimes carried more weight than words. Finally, he said, "You honor me, princess, but choice must go both ways. You chose me. I must also choose. That is what I told your mother." Kaelira's eyes did not turn away. "And have you chosen?" Elias exhaled slowly, searching for the right words. "Not yet. My respect for you grows, but choice cannot be forced. It must come in its own time." Her expression softened, almost gentle. She nodded. "Then I will wait. I am not afraid of waiting, Elias." Their words might have ended there, but the moment was broken when a shadow fell across the garden. 3 nobles stepped forward, their robes gleaming, their faces cold. They bowed only slightly to Kaelira before turning their eyes on Elias. "Princess," one said, his voice like sharpened glass, "this human's presence weakens the empire. He insults our traditions and speaks as if his small world has wisdom greater than ours. He should not walk these halls." Kaelira's gaze hardened. "You forget yourselves. You stand before me and you speak against one I chose." The nobles did not falter. "We speak for the empire. If your choice leads to weakness, then it is not worthy of you. Let us test him again here and now. If he survives, perhaps he deserves his place. If not, then he should be cast out." Elias felt the tension in the air like a storm. He knew this was not a simple challenge. It was a trap. The nobles wanted his failure, perhaps even his death. He looked at Kaelira, and for a moment he thought she might command them to leave. But instead she turned to him. "Will you stand, Elias?" she asked quietly. He met her eyes, then turned to the nobles. "If you believe I do not belong, then test me. But know this, I will not bow to tricks. Whatever you bring, I will face it as I am." The nobles sneered, and with a gesture one drew a blade of glowing crystal from his sleeve. It hummed with strange energy, unlike any weapon Elias had seen. The other 2 spread out, surrounding him like hunters circling prey. Kaelira did not move to stop them. But her eyes locked on Elias, watching, waiting. It was not cruelty. He realized she wanted to see him as he truly was, not as words painted him. The first noble lunged, his blade flashing. Elias moved fast, sidestepping, his instincts sharp from years of survival on Earth. The ground's crystal surface echoed under his boots. The second noble struck from behind, but Elias twisted, catching the strike with his forearm and shoving the man off balance. Pain burned his skin where the blade had grazed him, but he stayed upright. The third noble rushed in, and Elias dropped low, sweeping his leg out. The noble stumbled, crashing against the singing vines, which let out a sharp cry at the impact. Elias rose quickly, his breath steady despite the sting in his arm. The 3 nobles regrouped, their eyes flashing with anger. But before they could attack again, Kaelira stepped forward. Her voice cut through the garden like thunder. "Enough." The air itself seemed to obey her command. The nobles froze, lowering their blades reluctantly. She stepped between them and Elias, her presence fierce. "He stood against you 3 without fear. That is more strength than most of you have ever shown. You will not test him again without my mother's word." The nobles bowed stiffly, their pride wounded, and retreated into the shadows. When they were gone, Kaelira turned back to Elias. Her gaze was steady, her voice softer. "Now I have seen it with my own eyes. You do not just speak of strength, you live it." Elias met her eyes, breathing steady. "And now you see why choice matters? If I stood here only because I was told, would I fight the same way?" For the first time, Kaelira smiled fully, a rare and radiant thing. "Perhaps human. You are not the mistake they believe. Perhaps you are something more." The garden was quiet again, but the fire between them had grown. And in the shadows of the palace, the noble's anger burned hotter, plotting what would come next.